Yo,
Hey, how you going?
pretty good. How about you?
Good. Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. What have you been up to?
Lots of programming. How about you?
Nice, nice. Well, today I've actually been kind of trying to have one of these new rights programming, rights app AIs program for me, with not that much success, I have to say. Have you used any of those kind of platforms?
Sorry, what is the platform? Some AI writing tool?
Yeah, the one that I was using today is called Scout. I've also used a similar one called Replit, and it's basically ChatGPT but makes apps as the output.
Replit, but that's I don't. Am I misremembering what Replit is? I swear I used this in first year. Yeah, it's an online IDE. I guess maybe they've added.
I
Oh,
think
they're
they've
they're
added.
like advertising in terms of AI now. It's like in their in their site description now. Build apps and sites with AI. Wait, am I misremembering what the fuck Replit is?
It's
I
very
swear to God, I've
possible.
used this.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. It's very possible that it was something sort of more uh, general, and then since the advent of ChatGPT has become, as many things have, an AI augmented version of that. But yeah, one of the big features now is that you can pretty much type in natural language. I want the app to do this and that, and it makes it pretty flawlessly, in theory.
Yeah, I okay, well I'll say something about that. I looked and on first pass, it does look like it is the same thing that I'm thinking of. They've pivoted significantly into I guess. But when I was in first year, it was just an IDE, so like a coding environment that was online. And the thing that's nice about that is when you have noob students who don't know how to. Sorry, am I loud enough, by the way, or am I kind of quiet for you?
No, you're plenty loud.
Yeah, okay. When you have noob students who don't know anything about how to set up their environment, which is this kind of frustrating pre-task to programming, you can just bypass that by putting them on a site like this. But now that it has AI, I don't think they'll want to do that.
Right. Yeah. The whole. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Maybe they'll struggle to find one that doesn't have AI integrated, I guess.
As for your question, what was it? What do I think about them? Do I like them? Do I use them? What was the exact question?
I guess it was just a general question as to have you used them. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I've used them, but I don't. I use AI when I code, but I do everything through the terminal. There's a whole rationale behind doing that. So I don't use Replit. I don't use whatever they have plugged in there, but I do use AI. I find AI helpful, but I don't just tell the AI. Like it sounds like you're talking about vibe coding. Are you just telling the AI to do stuff? You don't actually know what the code itself does, but you get it to do some behavior and you're just building it up like that with the AI?
Yeah. Actually, yes, pretty much. But it's interesting because you discover. So, for example, I'm trying to have it make a system where users can make accounts. They type in their email, they type in their password, it saves their account, and then that's linked to like a database that has information that they can store and so on. And I'd given a sort of description and said, for example, my email is this, da da da, and it basically created what looked like a working version of the app that I had described, but it was only top layer. It didn't actually have a database linked to it, and
Yeah,
it
right.
just like looked like it worked with the username that I had provided. And then if you refreshed it, as everything's gone, I was like, "This isn't actually anything, is it?" And it was like, "Nah, sorry."
Yeah, did I'm wondering, Nick was telling me about somebody, he didn't mention their name, who had vibe coded a whole project and it imported like this giant font awesome database. There's no chance that's you, is it?
No, no, no. I'm afraid not.
Okay, I was just curious. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think that this is the thing. You used to have to learn in a different way. When I learned programming, which is so funny because I started my degree like 5 years ago. That's when I started programming.
May
So
as well be a
it's
hundred years ago
hilarious
now.
that it just moves so fast. Yeah, that's funny. So when I when I was learning programming back in what apparently is like the Stone Age now, you would not be able to just ask an AI things. You would have to program it, and when you need help, you would either have to look up the raw concepts, or you would go to Stack Overflow, and that had like a terrible community, but had answers to a lot of things. So the equivalent of what people do with AI, the closest you could get to that was kind of copy pasting code snippets you don't really understand to solve problems. So I guess that I think it's good that we have the AI stuff now for all of the obvious reasons. Like, AI is just a huge boon to society. It also enables lots of bad things, so obviously you want to curtail that. But like, more tech means more ability to do good things. AI enables programmers to do tons of stuff. It saves me tons of time. I am very pro AI, setting aside safety concerns, obviously, 'cause I'm also very serious about the AI safety stuff. But from a perspective of trying to do things, like if you want to actually produce an app or you want to learn programming, right now is a really fucked up time. You can either wait for the AI tools to get so good that you truly can vibe code being coding without actually writing any code, just talking to an AI and having the AI do all the code manipulation. Right now, that produces hilarious things that start falling apart. Basically, it works great for little things. It works great for templating. There's lots of things that are small that you can vibe code. If you try to grow a big vibe coded project, it'll implode after a while, and it'll have a ton of sort of ridiculous accumulating and compounding bad decisions in it. So you can either wait for AI to get good enough that you can actually vibe code at the level of like a good, decent programmer. I don't know how long that'll take. It could be sooner than we think. Or if you actually want to get productive in the meantime, you have to like learn some actual programming. You can have the AI assist you with that, but sadly you have to be like a disciplined student who like actually ensures they're understanding the things that the AI is giving them, which means you get an answer, and instead of just being like, oh, it works, it gives me the output I want, what's the next thing I want it to do? You're like, okay, the reason it works is these 20 lines of code. I need to look at these for like half an hour to understand what's going on. So that's the burden that gets imposed on you right now at this current time if you want to learn.
Yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it? I mean, I was really confronted with my inability to make the thing that I wanted to make just with my own skills. And I started today really confident that I was going to be able to vibe code, which is a code that a phrase that I'm only now acquiring, which I appreciate, to medium to large projects. And it's not there yet from what I can report.
No. What is it you're trying to build?
So there is actually a somewhat working version of the thing that I'm trying to build, which is let me DM you the link here. This is available. This is public, but I haven't publicized it because it doesn't work perfectly. But this was made in, I gather this was vibe coded in Replit by a student of mine, and I subsequently have done further refinements to the vibe code. But you can actually on here make an account with your email, and it does link to, I guess, an SQL database. And the thing that actually, can I screen share in? Oh, there we go. Okay, nice. So this is, you can somewhat see at a glance what it does. This is the dashboard page, and it's basically tracking the number of animals that an activist has saved. Here I am logged in with my account.
Interesting. Oh, this is cool. And are there also public profiles?
Yes. So there's this bit down the bottom is like a lead. Oh, you can't see. You can't see the bottom of this. Oh yeah, you can see. Like a leaderboard, if you can see, right?
Oh yeah, this is interesting.
So this is currently just. yeah, a few of the devs basically. Like I said, I haven't made this public, but and then for the charitable donations, there's like different levels of impactfulness based on animal charity evaluators numbers. You could do monthly donations so that it records, recurring. And then people that you've got to go vegan. So you've got like date that they started, date that they've ended if they did end, or leave blank if ongoing, right? And then how sort of meaty their diet was before and after. So this is going fully vegan. This might be going vegetarian, for example. And then also how much you influenced them. Did was it 100% up to you? Were you one of several factors? Maybe you can take 20% credit, something like that. These are all my mates who I've got to go various levels of vegetarian. So that's sort of counted up.
Yeah. Sorry, show me the rest, yeah.
Those are pretty much the main parts. I mean, this is the one bit where the numbers don't quite work at the moment. I think I think this is currently assuming that everyone who sees your social media posts instantly goes vegan. So probably want to refine that.
Yeah, just slight overestimation there.
Yeah, just a bit. And then this is from honestly, these are a little bit arbitrary, but these are just actions on online coordinated campaigns. The Humane League Fast Action Network is the one that I use. And then the dashboard is the combo of all four of those things. I've got a goal of 1 million, so I'm some way towards my goal.
Yeah, there's definitely things that I like about this. So I think that the idea of giving people some sort of generalized personal dashboard to track the vegan impact they have is cool. I suspect that people would find that interesting and motivating, almost kind of like a fitness tracker app. I'm sure some people would get something out of that. And probably it might motivate them to do more activism. It might just help them, I don't know, have some perspective on the activism they've done, and maybe that's encouraging for them. But yeah, I could see people enjoying the idea and the idea being useful. I also like that it's not like trying to be too many things. I like that there's not like a built-in messaging feature or something like that, and has all this extra stuff. I like that it's just supposed to be pretty much one tool. And the other thing is, I do think if you added the element of it being a leaderboard, then I mean, that probably could appeal to more people, because then it's almost sort of like a little social media platform that vegans will be concerned with. It'll be a vegan platform, but that ratings and rankings on there might have relevance to people and help them discover each other, and it might be motivating to be ranked higher or lower on them. Like you've seen those psychological studies, or isn't there stuff like if you post the monthly donations of the people around you, then like people donate more and stuff like I mean, I wonder if it'll play off that kind of psychology. So yeah, those are the things that I think are good, could be enjoyed by the individual, might motivate the individual. Also, the leaderboard thing could have more like bigger effects, help vegans find each other, encourage activists, like motivate them to try to climb up there, so even more motivation. And yeah, and good that it's not doing extra stuff like trying to be like a messenger or something like that, because we have good messengers. You can just incorporate an existing messenger. Yeah, so that's all good. But then in terms of actually doing it, yeah, I mean, if you vibe code it, it's just a huge liability. It's like, here's a black box, and it wasn't produced by a competent engineer. It was just produced by, aggregating. See, I don't want to shit on AI like that, because that can be really powerful, but it was produced by AI that currently is not very reliable for full-on projects. So it could just fall apart and randomly stop working. So in terms of actually making it, I think you'd want to use a language like Elm, build it on Nix, and something like Elm is actually, it's probably the easiest to learn and get working with and most pleasant programming language out there. So very feasible if someone on your team has like hours to put in over a few months to get something like that done. But yeah, you want to program it in a language like Elm where things can't break at runtime, where you get various guarantees about how it's going to work, guarantees about it being low maintenance, so it doesn't become like a kind of maintenance cost for you in the future in terms of time and money and having to research how to deal with bullshit. So yeah, that's what I think about it.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful feedback. And I mean, I'm pretty much, I was vibe coding a version of this today in order to try to launch it quite soon. And I think you've convinced me to probably commission a coder to do it properly. Because, yeah, I want to be able to know exactly what is going on in the black box and be able to reliably ask for changes in the black box as well, which is sort of why I've hesitated on launching this version that you're looking at now, because, like I say, this was made by a student of mine who's now finished her course and may well disappear off the face of the earth at any moment, although she's been quite good so far.
Oh yeah, no, that's crazy.
Yeah, so you don't really want that kind of situation.
Yeah. No, you don't know all the ways things can like break on you. The fact that it works right now doesn't mean it'll stay like that. Software requires maintenance. Things will happen, and you need to know someone who knows their way around it.
Yeah.
So you said you're kind of talking about it like paying someone. That of course is a reasonable way to go. But if you have the time, there is not a skill barrier to doing something like that. You could certainly, I could like basically show you what you need to learn to do that, and you can, ask for help as needed. We have some channels in the server for this kind of stuff. But if you have the time to put in, you could certainly achieve something like that. It's not a huge thing. We're talking like months to a year, probably, depending how much time you have, assuming you're starting from like no knowledge.
Interesting. I think that if the next person I hire will probably be a computer programmer, I feel more and more. So that will be maybe one for them. But yeah, I think I'm glad to hear you say that, because I have thought the whole time. Obviously I don't know exactly what's going on here in terms of the coding, but it's not that complicated an idea. I know what all the variables are. I could kind of build a schema of it in my head. I know what needs to happen. So, I hope that's the sort of thing. That's the sort of thing where I would hope that some level of foundational knowledge can get you to a point where vibe coding is going to be enough for the rest of it, right? If I kind of have a very solid scheme, like for example, noticing that it hadn't had a proper database. I mean, that was a very easy one, but other similar things going wrong. I suppose it's difficult to detect them always, isn't it?
Yes. Well, I mean, you can't always detect them. You will get bugs. The thing is, there's various tools that minimize danger. And I won't go into exactly what those are unless you end up wanting to go down that road, because that's a whole conversation. But there's basically, when humans make code, it's just thousands of lines of like commands and numbers and all this shit going on. It's like a fucking ecosystem. A program is like a little ecosystem, unless it's something really super simple. And it's also existing in a changing context. External APIs or things that it might be calling might change in a way that causes it to break. It's like building a little I don't know, again, like an ecosystem or something. And you can get like, you can't predict all of the problems that will occur. You just have to have good practice for mitigating, and if you can't mitigate, managing them. So yeah, with vibe coding, there's nothing wrong with using AI. Like, I am not suggesting you should not use AI. I'm suggesting that if your goal is to produce something reliable, you need to understand what the AI is writing. And you can actually do that by just talking more to the AI a lot of the time. Like, it gives you an answer, and you can ask it, what exactly is it that you just did. Walk me through that line by line, and you
Mhm.
need to actually get to a point that you can understand it. And there's various tools, like a little read, evaluate, print loop, where you can open up in terminal and you can type code in there and see what it produces in real time. That can be helpful. There's tools like Git for like versioning and rolling back. So here's really what I would say. I think that so there's kind of two different things. There's like if you're doing it or if someone else is doing it. If you're doing it, you just need a few foundational good practice things to get like a good environment set up. Like basically you need a versioning tool like Git, which that's not hard to understand. It's fairly straightforward. So that if the AI makes changes that break everything, you can just roll back to the prior state that where
Mm.
you saved, where you know that everything works.
Mhm.
So you want to have something like that, a proper versioning tool, not just a like save most recent or relying on something like that. And you want to have good tool choices from the start. So basically, use a good appropriate programming language for the task. And then once you have your little environment you can code in, which you could set that up on Windows. You use Windows, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a Linux subsystem for Windows. I can actually show you how to do this if you want to. You can get a nice little isolated, clean environment there to do programming. And you could talk to the AI in that environment and have a proper version managing thing. And then you can use a good language. And with those few like good starting points, there's a ton of other stuff I would recommend if someone were like, I just have infinite free time to really do this right. There's a lot of other stuff I'd say. But that basic setup gives you a good clean start that you can iterate on safely while actually learning what's happening. Safely in the sense you can roll back if you have to. Well, you can actually learn what's happening. And yeah, you could build up what you want by doing that. Then I also wanted to say about if you're hiring someone, two things about that. So one, the fact that you can give a good high level description of what you want, like I want this page to do this, I want this button to go to this page, I
Mm.
want this to do that. That's actually a lot more than a lot of software engineers deal with a lot of the time. Like as a software engineer, you learn, and a lot of a university degree on focus on software engineering is about communication with customers, because customers don't know anything about technology and they're very bad at describing what they want. So you have to have all of these kind of tools to get to the core of what they want and make sure you can deliver something close enough to that. Um, so you coming in with that clear and understanding, that is something that'll actually be helpful to you and save you a lot of time at the outset, and it'll put your programmer on the right track. And finally, one other thing, if you're hiring somebody to do it, some programmers will be picky about languages and stuff like that, and not for good reasons. I'm very picky about these things. I like to think for good reasons, though maybe not always. I don't know. But there's certain things I could definitely say about specific tools that you'd want to use for something like this and why it would be desirable, or at least certain features you want to make sure your tool has. And I think you want to consider those things, and I'm happy to talk to you about it if need be, rather than just trust a particular programmer. You want to make sure that whatever they're building you is a very extensible, stable, modular, low maintenance foundation. Something that you're not going to incur this big future maintenance cost for, or just more future maintenance costs than you want to, or that's very low. And where if they are gone, because who knows, maybe they change career, maybe they who the fuck knows what's going to happen, maybe they
Mm.
get cancer or something. It's well documented, and the tooling and architecture makes it easy for another dev to come in and pick everything up, rather than you've got a bunch of that dev's really particular choices built up. Maybe they've used a kind of poor language, and now someone else coming in has this huge and frustrating learning curve.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. No, it's good to know what are the things to consider when approaching a project like this. I've got one for you. Well, I've got written down a few things that I wanted to talk to you about. One is something that I know
I'll
you've
just say
got.
before you do that,
Oh yeah, go on.
feel free to ask if you are doing stuff with that or hiring someone. You can ask about it, and I'll be happy to give you like a bit of feedback on that.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, and that is really
I would
helpful.
feel I would feel bad if you went and paid a bunch or put a bunch of time into doing it in a way that's like needlessly suboptimal when it could have just been like literally like 5 minutes of my day to just like, oh, you're doing that, pick this thing and save yourself like a shitload of pain.
Fair. Yeah, that's good to know. I think, yeah, being, yeah, doing things imperfectly and learning as you go is definitely, definitely a feature of my approach to things. I suppose it's, yeah. Is there more
I'm not
risk
hating on
taking
that.
than
There's
that?
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
not hating on that. You just want to have some. You just want to be pointed in the right direction initially. But yeah, I just wanted to be clear. Like you can ask about it. I'll be happy to help because that's a quick thing to look at, easy to help with. You don't have to feel like you have to like pay a whole Patreon session or something like that for me to answer a question about that. So yeah, but yeah, sorry. What was the other thing you were
Yeah.
wanting to ask or say?
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
problem.
I know the feeling of watching someone not quite being an expert, the thing that you know about. Yeah, so the YouTube channel has been going decently well, I would say, and well
Oh,
enough
nice.
that I've acquired my first hater, which is very exciting. And they consistently post about a topic that I know that you've got thoughts on, which is crop deaths. And
Who's the hater?
it's somebody who their YouTube name is the Fetuk.
What?
Yeah, the Fetuk. And they post on almost all of my videos saying that unless you're doing your own veganic brackets subsistence agriculture farming and producing all of your own food, then you are a hypocrite due to crop deaths.
Okay, I asked because I thought it might have been one of the like classic YouTube vegan trolls, like Assassin, or there's some others who I'd recognize their name.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah,
that's interesting. I'll try and see if I can pick up any of those guys.
Oh, I'm sure you will. Yeah, I mean, I have my comments off on YouTube. Not actually. Well, that's a whole story, but yeah, I'm looking at your channel also. It looks like you're now regularly pulling a few hundred views. Are you having to pay for any advertisement for that, or is that just 100% organic right now?
That's all organic. That's me spamming
good.
it into Reddit and Discord channels, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, so there, I mean, you could say that's some little amount of inorganic, but the thing with ads, I don't know. It seems like with ads, things can be like you. I've seen cases where I don't know if it's just a fully ad-powered thing and the person's pulling in almost nothing. So I feel like ads might be able to skew the picture a bit, but this is good. This is like, there's 100 people at least, it seems, like taking the lowest one, who seem to think what you're saying is worth coming and listening to regularly. So yeah, this is like very good. I'm glad to see it.
Excellent. Thanks so much, dude. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't watched a lot of it, so I'm assuming that I'm happy with it.
I could be saying terrible things on there.
Like, oh God, like, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, was there actually some specific thing about what this person said, or?
Well, I suppose.
To...
Yeah, I suppose I just invite you to share your views on crop deaths. I mean, I've heard you say that you don't consider crop deaths to be rights violation. Period. I guess. Is that the case?
I don't. That I
or I guess just have at your view on just have at your view on crop deaths. I guess I don't need to give you a specific. Yeah.
No, because that's not how I really. That's not the language that I normally use when I speak about them. So I'd have to. What was it? Well, whatever. It doesn't matter if you don't.
Sure. Yeah. Just whatever framing you prefer, basically.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's. I have a whole thing about hypocrisy arguments. I gave there's like a 9-minute long recorded voice message somewhere in general of me just like ranting about this topic. Do you want I guess what might be helpful is, do you currently struggle with answering this stuff, or are you just curious about my take on it?
I think I
Sometimes it
have.
can be easier to answer from the perspective of like addressing the thing that is confusing the person rather than just like here's my huge like I can do that too if you want, but
Yeah,
here's my huge overview of this whole area or something.
I hear you. I hear you. There's a lot that could be said about it. Well, I mean, yeah, that's my thoughts as well, honestly. And I think that I do have sort of several answers that I could give to this type of objection to veganism, as it were. Um, Obviously, on one level, there's the thing about most crop deaths are going to be attributable to feed. So, in any case, reducing crop deaths means reducing animal consumption, and then somebody can say, well, if you have pasture-reared animals, they're going to entail very few crop deaths. I think that it could be the case that there are, pasture-reared animals that entail fewer animals dying per calorie or whatever metric one prefers. But I don't think that we can take for granted really much about wild animals. Including like whether their lives are net positive or negative, and whether they are causing much more suffering in the lives of others. Right? I mean, I've heard you talk about this stuff to some extent. I've seen 3 hours of debunking hypocrisy arguments with Avi, and I've seen you guys talking about the lion question and that kind of thing. So I suppose there's several layers to this, but yeah, I mean, yeah, you can react to anything I've said there, or just your take on kind of the crop deaths question overall.
Okay. Well, yeah, so that to me sounds a little bit disjointed. And I think the problem, or at least a problem, is probably not being clear about what the criticism is supposed to be. So I think that my number one thing that I say to vegans about this is to not start reflexively fighting back against unclear claims. Generally speaking, hypocrisy arguments are like vague. They're like they're one of the places where the most vague gesturing happens of any area I've ever seen in human discourse. It seems like it's a kind of exploit where if you vaguely gesture at like vegans doing some killing or vegans being hypocrites or other hypocrisy things like suicide nets in Chinese factories or so, it seems like all of that makes vegans get really defensive and to start lashing out against an unclear critique, and then actually that's like a counterproductive reaction that they're having. Feels like the right thing to do is to fight back, but fighting back actually just confuses it's like confuses you and makes you look kind of strange because you're not fighting something clear. So it's almost like bait. It's like here's this vague gesture implying some shitty thing about you, maybe that you're a hypocrite, or maybe that you should be fine with eating meat or whatever exactly. And then the vegan starts fighting back against that vague thing, and they look bad because what they're fighting isn't clear. So there's like some layers of clarification that a Carnus can give where we'll start talking about pretty specific things about crops, but this is sort of the level 1 or the level 0 is just actually getting a clear claim. So like, what is the claim supposed to be? And if you look at this person's text, you might be like, I don't actually know. It might be that they seem like they're saying different things at different times, and we could take possible candidates and go through them one by one, because these things don't always terminate in the same way. But yeah, that would be question 1, is just what is the claim? Is it that vegans are hypocrites? Is it that you should be comfortable eating meat? That like what exactly? The crop deaths shouldn't be a moral problem on your view? What exactly is the criticism supposed to be?
Yeah, so I think it is basically hypocrisy. Yes, they have said hypocrisy in the criticism. It would see, well, there's more that I can say, but that's the short answer.
So the criticism is vegans are hypocrites?
I suppose, yes, that's correct. Yeah, oh yes, I was wondering whether the person themselves. At first, I thought, well, maybe this is actually a vegan who grows all their own food, and they're just like really keen to shout about that because they weren't really clear. But now, in latter comments, it seems to be clear that that's not the case.
What, they've started talking about eating animals, presumably?
I think they've just said something like vegans are hypocrites. They're driving towards vegans are hypocrites because crop deaths.
Okay. So vegans are hypocrites, not convinced that's true because crop deaths. So that's not quite an argument. So that's kind of the next step. Is like, okay, we've actually managed to get a claim, which is good. A lot of people will actually fail at that step. If you just try to get them to be precise, sometimes there isn't actually a claim. But okay, we have a claim. Vegans are hypocrites.
Yes, well, I will say this is me recreating what I suppose their argument to be, and I might inject more charitability than they might if they were trying to be pinned to a claim in the conversation, so that's a factor. But let's say that this is the claim, basically, yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to get you to sort of see the process that I would go through with something like that. So the first stage is just to get out of vague gesture territory, because that's often how stuff like this comes up. And then once we've got a clear claim, we'd have to think about how do we want to frame it. Is the claim that vegans are hypocrites and then the support is something about crop deaths, or is the claim vegans are hypocrites because crop deaths? We have to kind of get clear about that. But both of those I'm going to disagree with. So we can pick one, and then the next phase is going to be, well, okay, what's the argument for that thing?
Yeah.
So which do we want to say here? It seems like the atomic one is it's like the simplest one, right? Like let's
I think it's
just that vegans are hypocrites.
Yes, basically.
Whatever the crop deaths is, that can be the reasoning for it.
Well, yes, the crop deaths is very much this person's concern.
Yeah, so we have this claim now, which is that vegans are hypocrites. And there's some reasoning for that apparently has to do with crop deaths. And now the ball's back in your court, right? So notice, like, I'm not at any point in here going, okay, pass me the ball. I'm gonna start taking shots.
I see what you're saying.
What's the claim? Okay, we have the claim. I'm not convinced that's true. You think that's true? Okay, so what's the argument for that?
Okay. So it's because my instinct and the instinct of many people listening would be to roughly go, look, basically what they're saying, and then pretty much to construct a whole argument that they haven't necessarily given, and you kind of assume that they would say, right, and you're just saying make them do the work, basically.
Yeah, there's what make them do the work breaks down to like making them do the work is a technical thing. You have to understand what it means for them to do the work and how to make them do that and how things work. But that is kind of the core of what's going on, or at least a big part of it is don't take on a burden when you don't need to. But yeah, I want to add to what you said that not just many, in my experience, I would actually say the vast majority. And I'm usually pretty careful about if I say some, most, just like over 50%, a lot, many. I think this is the vast majority. Like, I think probably 9 in 10 vegans react this way. So it's like become a exploit in the sort of vegan debate meta. And yeah, I mean, basically what's happening is that they're having to do the work, but it's not that really the core idea is to have a model of what fair discourse looks like, and then just to kind of operate within that model sort of mechanically. And a consequence of that is that the burden of proof ends up where it should be. So it's not like the burden of proof ending up where it should be as the starting point. Some like broader kind of goal for how discourse should work is sort of the starting point. But that ends up being a big feature of what's happening here, because this is a case where a sort of burden shift occurs. But it's a weird one, because usually the Carnus doesn't actually explicitly, well, maybe I shouldn't say usually. See, I am careful about when I say usually. Often the Carnus doesn't actually explicitly place a shifted burden on the vegan. The vague gesture just prompts the vegan to randomly take the burden of proof against a claim that's not clear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then okay, so in terms of making them do the work, so what is the work? Well, the first bit of work is if you're trying to say you're speaking to me with a tone, or typing at me in a tone that suggests you think I'm wrong, right? That's how you're communicating with me. That's the vibe of what you're saying. I don't know what it is you think I'm wrong about, though. So what exactly is the error? That's step one. Just get a clear claim. And whatever they put on the table, you understand it? If not, then we're just kind of back to square one. You could flowchart this. We're back to square one. Like, okay, well, so what is the claim? Don't understand what you just said. If you do understand it, then you're going, okay, well, do I actually disagree with it or not? Or do I have a different doxastic state, like belief, disbelief, agnosticism, than this person? If you do, well, then there's actually room to have an argument. If not, if you already agree with them, well, then it terminates there. I don't even disagree with what you just said. If you do, okay, I disagree. And then you have a choice, right? Now that you actually know the claim and you know that you disagree with it, now there's a question of, do you take on the burden, or do you want to just let them take on their own burden? You can always go, okay, I'm going to falsify that once there's an actual claim. Obviously, you should not do that when the claim is just some vague mist or something. But you don't need to. And sometimes it's good not to, because people need to learn a lesson. And the lesson isn't always best learned by just getting walloped. Sometimes it's learned by just like trying as hard as you can to get somewhere and realizing you can't get anywhere because you don't even know what you're saying. So, yeah. And you can pick your choice there. Sometimes you see a really good, really obvious reason it's false, though. That would just be hilarious. So you can go for that. But minimally, you can just leave the ball in their court because they're the one making the claim. And then, yeah, assuming you're on that path, rather than you've taken on the burden at this point, which again, I had no problem with you taking the burden. You just should do it out of a conscious choice when it's actually appropriate to do it, not be thrust into it by bad debate mechanics. Once you are, so we're on the pathway now where claim has been clarified, we have a disagreement, and you're just saying, okay, what's the argument for it? Because they're the one making the claim. Well, then you want to see what the argument is. You want to look at the premises, look at the form of the argument. Is the form acceptable to you? If not, well, then you have a problem because the premises don't lead you to any change in credence about the conclusion. If the form is okay, well, then great. Now let's actually examine the premises. And yeah, basically this stuff just always kind of burns out. So you can try the next phase if you want to try to generate the argument that concludes vegans are hypocrites from whatever scattered bits you've gotten from this person. But the arguments always just turn out not being sound. It always either falls apart, like, oh, the claim's not clear, claim's not actually something I disagree with, don't have an argument for the claim, or if they actually get through all three of those, they have an argument, the argument's just not sound.
Yeah. There's a couple things. Okay, there's a couple things that I really want to do. One is to ask you about, and I know this isn't going to be necessarily your primary concern, but the rhetorical effectiveness of doing that vis-a-vis. I mean, it feels like most people will just be most people are not going to appreciate what's happened there, and they'll just think, well, the vegan guy didn't really say anything. The one guy said crop death, and the vegan guy just kind of said, just asked him questions. And do you know what I mean? Most people won't come away with the feeling necessarily that the crop deaths guy didn't know what he was talking about in that scenario. Or do you disagree with that?
It depends how it's framed. I think that I talk in a particular way to you. For instance, when I'm talking to you, I'm not putting any effort into framing things in a way that favor veganism, because I'm not trying to persuade you of veganism. You're just already a vegan, right? I also am assuming I can talk at a certain level of complexity because you have a degree and you do research and stuff like that. There's various things that are shaping how I'm talking to you right now. They're different than if I talk to the average person. There's also the fact that this is a conversation where the goal is explaining, at least in that part of the conversation, My goal was something like explaining the whole mechanics behind why it works to respond in a certain way to them. That's not the
Yeah.
same as actually giving the response. If I were actually in a discussion with Akarna saying that, I don't give this whole meta explanation about
No.
like why what I'm saying makes it. It's just a very simple, very fast, and if they run into the same wall, very repeated thing, which makes it very clear what's going on. And with
Okay.
debate, there's a impulse to just talk a lot, right? Like right now we're talking. I know you want to hear ideas about stuff, so I just like burn an idea all the way to the ground and talk about all
Hmm.
the parts of it. But in a debate, that's almost counterproductive. Like
Mm.
you want to say the smallest thing as possible,
Mm.
as you want it to be the simplest language as possible, and you want to use the same phrasing, literally repeat the words as much as possible. So
Hmm.
the meta structure of the debate comes across clearly, because
Yeah.
otherwise you can even get to a state where you're coherently replying to everything, yet the overall effect is muddy waters. So all of that, yeah. So there's a lot of stuff about framing. So in an actual discussion, this would just be like they make claim, oh, I'm not totally sure what you're saying. What are you saying? They make some claim, sorry, I when you say X, what are you trying to say, right? Eventually we get clarity on the claim, right? But you notice there, I'm not going into some big thing. I'm just saying, sorry, what are you saying? What's the claim? I'm
Yes,
just
I
trying to
see.
understand the claim. They make the claim. I don't disagree. What is that? 3 words? I
Hmm.
don't disagree. There's one pathway right there. Say it's a claim that I actually do disagree with. Oh, okay. I'm not convinced that's true. What's the argument for that? Right. Notice that these things are all very quick, snappy, easy to follow, and will be repeated if the person does something that's illegitimate, like they start rambling about some other topic. They do that, and I'll go, well, wait, no, before you made this claim, I disagreed, and I asked you what the argument is for that, and I'm still waiting for that. And so you can see it's all very quick, very choppy, very, very like, maybe choppy is not the right word. It's like very quick, snappy. It's very like snappy, simple language, easy to understand, easy to follow, and clearly communicates the meta structure of what's happening. Like, I'm just trying to understand the claim. Oh, I'm just trying to get the argument for that, right?
Yeah.
So do I think that you can be effective like that? Yeah, absolutely. I think people just watch that and they just see a perfectly clear conversation. And really, with stuff like this, it's always just a bunch of vague bullshit. When you're just clearly saying the same thing repeatedly over and over, and the other guy's just failing over and over again to make an argument or even be consistent, they seem to be saying different kind of stuff every time they're talking. Yeah, I mean, I think that's about as effective as any other. Maybe that's not the right. Maybe
No,
that's
I
not the
think
right way
yeah.
to phrase it, but I don't see like a reason to worry that there's like some kind of comprehension or optics problem with that there isn't somewhere else. And if anything, I suspect that it would be easier to understand that than to various other possible things, like watching each give like a panel discussion or sorry, a presentation for like 10 minutes each or something like. I
Mm.
think that's clear and easy enough to follow, and there's no big communication barrier there. And it's probably better than various other things.
Yeah, that's a really good. Yeah, that's a really good answer. It's like a demonstration. You're probably often approaching conversations thinking, I know this person is not going to be able to express themselves. It's just going to be a demonstration of that for however long that lasts, and then
Yeah,
yeah, that kind of is quite effective, eh?
I think so, and I think also there's lots of aspects to this. There's also like your own attitude, right? I mean, I have this particular view about communication. I think basically that humans have we seem to have the ability to pick up on lots of like little micro expressions and subtle things, like the way someone is standing or the way they're not standing given how they normally stand. We don't consciously register all these things, they just leave this subtle imprint. And all of your sort of small little uncontrolled unconscious mannerisms, where your vocal inflection goes, where how you're moving or not moving, all of these things form an impression for the other person subtly. So I think another dimension of this, I think the only way to manage those things, there is no micromanaging like, oh, I must watch the movement of my hand, or I must
Hmm.
watch my blinking interval or something. Like that's obviously, if you tried to do that, you'd look like some kind of insane person or something. That's not possible. But if you actually have good intentions, then you will naturally produce all that kind of you'll naturally produce all those subtle signs the person can't actually articulate that make them receptive to you. So I don't actually come in. It's kind of weird because it's maybe almost a bit like a contradiction, but I do kind of. It's like intention and prediction is maybe a good way to think about it.
Mm,
I do predict that will probably happen. I think it's fairly likely just because I've thought a lot about the topic. I know how the topic works. I've had a lot of these conversations. I probably have some idea who the other person is, how competent they're likely to be. I probably have some assessment about how, if I'm doing a debate, I probably think that I'm going to do well in that debate.
mhm.
And I probably have reasons for thinking that. So I do believe that, but that's not. I try to clear stuff like that actually from my mind as much as possible when I do a debate. If I notice it during a debate, before a debate, I try to just I try to focus on my intention rather than what I predict will happen. And my intention is just to express my views and hear the other person's views and do my best to make myself clear. And if I can't say anything that works for them, then say something that works for people listening. And I try to focus on just having positive collaborative sort of intention. So it's just a little flag of like, I do predict that, but I don't actually come into discussions with intentions like that because I think they're subtly corrupting and they lead to things like mysteriously going off the rails and getting adversarial.
Mm. That's really good advice. Very mindful reflections of someone who's done a lot of debates, I guess. I think I have a sense in my mind of what this person with their crop deaths criticism is trying to express. So why don't I try to give their criticism to you, playing devil's advocate, and you can, destroy the crop deaths arguments once and for all.
Sure, but but notice that even when you do that, I will like the way that I respond to this, kind of try to show you the right way to answer, because it's not just okay. Now you go on like a 5-minute rampage about this guy's crop thing here, and then I'm just going to try to hit every point. Let's keep the structure in mind, right? So we have the claim, and I disagree with the claim, and now we're looking for the argument for that claim.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you can figure out how it works into an argument, then go for it. But if it's just like 5 minutes of kind of like talking about generally things this guy has said, well then I'll just listen to all of that and then just respond by kind of back to that sort of square one thing. Okay, what exactly is the claim?
Yeah. Okay. Appreciated. So let me try to do it as close to syllogistically as I can to start, and this is not my forte, so
it doesn't have to be formally valid, but just some general, like some premises, and we know what the conclusion is already. So the conclusion is we can write it. I mean, I'll type in
yeah, let's do that. I was going to screen share just a little Google Doc. Is that
oh, we can do that
too. You want to do it in the chat?
No, that's fine too. You want to do you prefer?
Yeah, let's do that, because I can. I'll show this on my. I'll show this.
Do you want to share the link to it? Do you want to just?
Oh, I will do it.
No, that's fine.
Do you know I'll do it?
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, we'll do it. Okay, sweet.
So we know the conclusion is that vegans are hypocrites. You can write like C dot. Well, actually,
yes,
okay. I'm telling you what to write. So
you're doing the work for me.
Maybe. Well, actually, whatever. It's just one. Yeah. Vegans are hypocrites. So there's got to be some set of premises, P1 through N, that lead to that conclusion.
Yeah.
Right? So let's try to figure out what those are.
Okay. So
don't get stuck on formal validity. Just generally try to express, and I'll try to help make it valid if it's problematic.
Okay, I got you. Vegans exclude animal. Now, the way that the Vegan Society expresses this is exploitation, which already you're going to run into some problems, but let's... because it's not clear that crop deaths would be exploitation, but let's say killing or exploitation, right? If we're trying to make the view work from their lifestyle. Consuming commercially produced crops entails animal killing. Do I need something else here? Right, hypocrites. If
That's fine. I mean,
okay.
you could adjust some of the phrasing to make it valid, but I get the idea. It's like vegans do X. Vegans are against X, but this thing is an instance of X, and vegans do X, so vegans are hypocrites.
Yeah.
Vegans exclude, yeah.
Something like that, right?
Yeah, so vegans do this, commercial is that, so vegans yeah, so I mean, you'd have to match the language directly to make it like formally valid under, like, if you just did a strict natural language to formal language kind of interpretation of it, but I can tell what you're saying there, so it's fine to me. It's just kind of like P and Q implies R, therefore R is like the kind of thing you're going for.
Yeah.
So yeah, given you, okay, so you know I'm not really gonna criticize the form. So I mean, I can tell you where I object, but I think sometimes the whole like getting someone to, again, maybe it feels boring or pedantic or kind of like, why are we doing this? But a lot of these things are problems born of like not dotting your I's and crossing your T's and doing the basics right and getting thrust into a more complicated world than you need it to be. And just doing the basics will just make it fall apart. So we got our claim. We disagree with the claim. We're looking for the argument for the claim. And to be clear, we don't disagree some vegans are hypocrites, but if it's presumably supposed to mean all vegans are hypocrites.
Right. Or those who consume commercially produced crops, I suppose.
Sure, we could narrow it to that. I'm not gonna harp on that aspect of it right now, because the point is just there's some group of vegans that we can grant that this applies to that we disagree are hypocrites, and that's what we sort of need to like have an argument about it. Yeah. But yeah, of course there's some vegans who are hypocrites. Yeah, so you know I'm not going to take issue with the form. Can you predict where I'm going to object to this? In fact, don't even try to think about it from my perspective. Think about it from your own perspective. Do you see any like yeah, so what stands out to you?
Well, so there's going to be a missing clause here about practical and possible, which I know you also have something.
Well, let's just be a bit clear. So missing clause makes it sound like there's another premise or something needed, but we don't need any more premises because we can think of it like it translates to a valid argument. I think missing clause. So I'm just trying to try to get you.
Okay, yeah, sure.
I think by missing clause, do you actually mean something like one of these is false and would have to be reformatted?
Yes, so to put it more precisely, I would take issue with the first premise that it needs to be a bit more precise to allow for, obviously you can't exclude all killing and exploitation from your life, so it's add something about to whatever extent possible or something like that, right? So I'd have some objection to the first premise, yeah.
So you could just say that you think premise one is false, and at this point you can fight back because it's just an analytic truth. That's just not what you mean by vegan. So they're not talking about the same thing as you when they talk about vegans, and that is just false by definition on your understanding of veganism. Presumably, your understanding of veganism doesn't exclude killing.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Even then, I'm sort of doing too much to interpret what they might have meant, hey?
Yep, that's the problem, is they're preying on your charitability, right? They might not be intending to do that, but that is what they're doing. They're vaguely gesturing and hoping that you will be anxious enough about maybe what they're saying making sense that, again, this isn't I don't think they're consciously doing this. It's just what happens. You'll start fighting against it without it being clear. But yeah, it seems like you're noticing it more and more because you're pointing out when you're doing too much work for them. So yeah, I mean, I think so. What, like, it's not obvious to me why I'd accept that. So what is it? And I think if you keep tweaking and trying to make it work, you'll just realize it just keeps breaking down into something that's not sound. And then you might eventually go, fuck, okay, it's not that vegans are hypocrites. Maybe I need to like try to get a better conclusion. Like vegans shouldn't have a problem with like eating meat, or vegans should. And you'll just see the same thing happens with all of them. So you got to kind of like run it through a bunch of times, but they're all gonna basically this sort of cycle we just went through of like, get the claim, make sure you actually disagree, get the argument, then look at the argument and just see some like glaring massive issue with it. That's just what'll happen over and over again with this. And again, most vegans don't understand that's how you are supposed to, or at least that's an actual functional way to deal with crop death stuff. vast majority, in my experience, again, just start lashing out at the vague thing, but it literally crumbled so easily here, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least this iteration of it. You could try to fix it, but it's I intend to hear it out fairly. I predict it'll be the same.
I'm going to clip that at the start of the video and put "Ask Yourself Destroys PhD." Okay, I still have the instinct that I could be more charitable and further define this and say, okay, well, what if we say exclude animal to whatever extent practicable and possible is the phrasing that they have, right? Beyond the let's say consuming commercially produced crops entails killing or animal killing. How do I want to phrase this? To an extent which is which would be avoidable which could be practically and possibly avoidable.
Which is not practicable and or possible.
Yeah.
Right. If it's got to be practicable and possible, then
yeah,
not be one of those things, right?
Yeah, commercially
that's
produced.
one.
Yeah. Okay. Which is not practical and possible. Or to an extent which is not practical. This doesn't make sense, does it?
The phrasing is weird, but I get it. Consuming commercially produced crops entails animal killing, which is practicable and possible to avoid.
Oh yes. Which is practically avoidable, right?
Sure.
So you could do all of your own veganic farming, our critic might say. So therefore, even if the vegan says, well, I don't exclude all animal killing, we can still get to the same conclusion, basically.
Sorry, pardon?
So, I mean, to further emulate the argument here, right? If we have further defined it as such, and then, okay, so now, do we agree with premise one now? I think we probably do, right?
Vegans exclude animal killing or exploitation from their lifestyle to whatever extent practicable and possible. Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing is, for me, I don't like some of the way that veganism gets talked about, so I kind of don't have a huge I don't really have much of a dog in the fight over the label. So I'd rather frame these things in terms of how I'm a hypocrite, because then I can just talk about my own views, which presumably qualify as vegan. But we can also just talk about veganism under some given understanding. So if this is, so I don't know if I'm consistent about how I use the term vegan. So when you ask me to kind of sign off on premise one, like, that is a definition of vegan that I, to some extent, understand. I think exploitation is a bit vague, and I think a lot of people would recognize that as the I think a lot of people would say that is the definition of a vegan, or an appropriate definition of a vegan, even if they also are a bit unclear about some of the terms in it. So yeah, when you ask me if I disagree, it's like it's a claim about what veganism means, right? Like, vegans exclude this. It's like this is telling us about, presumably this isn't like a synthetic thing, right? Like, this is an analytic truth about what veganism means. It's like a definition. It's just being vegan means that one excludes animal killing and exploitation from their lives, correct?
Yes, and just side point, when you say synthetic thing, it could be true that all vegans are wearing green right now, but that would just be coincidence. Is that the kind of thing that means?
Yes, yeah, like, because the thing is, vegans, like, there's two ways I can think of looking at this. One where you already have some notion of vegan in your head, and then you're being told a synthetic fact about what they do,
Hmm.
like wearing green. Or you could be being told something about what vegans do, which is like part of the definition of being vegan. Like it's an analytic thing.
Yes, right. So this
So
is like if someone is a vegan, then someone is a vegan if
yeah,
and only if, right?
well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, analytic truth doesn't have to be if and only if. It can be some like a triangle. Uh, Having three sides is analytically part of being a triangle, but that's not all there is to be a triangle. There are three-sided things which aren't triangles, right? Um, so you can have an analytic truth, which is about, it's about something that's it's not like an equivalence. It's like a subset kind
I
of
see.
thing. But that's it's like a little side point. Basic point is just you could have a kind of a synthetic or an analytic interpretation of that sentence. I think the one that you're going for is analytic, but I
Hmm.
want to kind of ensure that. Okay, so where it is analytic, then I guess we need to kind of ask on which, I guess we have to think about on which definition, because if it's supposed to be given how I use the term, I'm not totally sure that I don't know that all my usage comports to that. So I would say I'm not really convinced of P1 if it's supposed to be about my own usage of the term vegan. If we're supposed to just go, if on the other hand it's like, no, this is analytic just on the notion of vegan I'm providing a notion of vegan to this argument is supposed to be understood with respect to a particular definition of vegan. There's no need for you to be committed to that particular definition in your own usage. Let's see what follows with respect to that. I can interpret it that way and then say, sure, premise one's an analytic truth on that definition. But if you're asking, so it's, I guess I have to, there's an unspoken part of the premise that determines whether I agree with it or not,
Hmm.
and it's about how to interpret it. Is vegans there just being? Is there a sense provided by the argument that we're supposed to understand vegans with respect to, or am I supposed to be using my own notion?
Um, I
Way to
think
get
that
no pushback on the premise is just to say we provide one.
yeah, I'm.
Go, were you? This is
Mm,
just a critique given the vegan society definition or something like that.
yeah, I mean, I'm torn because I don't really want to run a critique against a definition that you don't actually hold, but also, uh, I don't. Well,
Well, I don't even know that I hold a definition.
yeah, that might be tricky then.
terms can be a bit polysemous. Like, I mean, I don't put much
Ooh, that was a
stock in the
nice
term
word. What was
like
that?
polysemous,
Hmm.
something that has multiple meanings.
Nice.
Yeah, because like I don't personally put a lot of stock in the word. Like I don't really use it as a philosophical device and like carve out a whole kind of position like I use it because it's the term that most quickly gives someone a general sense of what I believe. But when
Yeah.
I look at the exact ways that it's written about, I'm like, well, I don't know exactly how to interpret that, and I don't know if I'm committed to every detail of that.
Yes.
So when I use it, it's kind of doubtful that I'm like always using it in the vegan society sense. I might be kind of using it in different sense at different times. Like maybe sometimes I'm using it dietarily, maybe sometimes I'm using it ethically, maybe sometimes the ethical usage is to capture sort of all self-identifying vegans, maybe sometimes I'm the ethical usage is to capture all people who are something like in that definition who are trying to do some kind of harm reduction. But yeah, if you aim it at how I use the term, you're going to get this whole kind of sort of psychological human reality of how we actually think about things kind of wall where it's like I don't know, the term could be a bit polysemous. I'm not super committed to like some particular definition. I'm happy to talk about myself or some other person who we think qualifies as a vegan and look at whether they're a hypocrite. But yeah, you won't really get someone like me to kind of take the bait of like buy into some specific codification of what vegan means that's got like various ambiguities that can be exploited by the carnists that I myself am also kind of like, I don't know if I even like that aspect of the definition. So yeah,
Mm,
if you aim it at me, you're gonna get that, and that's not really gonna be helpful, because then you're just gonna, I mean, then how exactly then I guess you end up in a place where you have to prove that I'm always using the term that way, which seems really weird. That you're in some very weird empirical area at that point.
mm.
But if you use the vegan society definition or some popular vegan definition, then you can just totally cut that all out and go, I don't care what you mean. I don't have to deal with any of your semantics around the term. I just want to target veganism, the like common notion as expressed here or something.
Yeah.
Then we'll have a different kind of conversation, because then premise one will be just an analytic truth. I'll agree with it, no problem,
Mm.
and we can look at the other premises.
Okay, yeah, I would like to take that path, but first, would you like to just say a little bit more about why that's? Because there are some people who will hear what you just said as sort of Weasley debate tacticking, right? That you won't actually commit to a definition. I mean, it seems clear to me that it's coherent to say this is the kind of the type of belief that I have. There's in this area, it's concerned with animals, right? You could say I'm a feminist. I'm concerned with women's issues, even if you don't have a very precise definition of feminism on the table, for example. Do you have anything more insightful to say about why it's fine to approach this as you have here?
Well, what exactly is the criticism supposed to be? That we like what's it supposed to be? That we should be able to give like necessary and sufficient conditions for like membership for
Yes, let's
any
thank you for
given firm?
yes.
Well, then that person can tell me how they define couch or something. I mean, like,
Okay.
I'm not of the opinion that doing that is like that. I'm not sure that it's epistemically possible a lot of the time. Like that I'm in an epistemic position to know how to give a definition like that. And there could even be cases, maybe it even works where it's not actually like logically possible or something. I'd have to think about that. But I'm not convinced that people are really in positions to define things in general in that kind of way. And if someone thinks that they can, I suspect they've just like never done any philosophy in their life, because some of the, if you do that might be a slight exaggeration, but they probably have not spent much time with philosophy, because if you do some philosophy, you're gonna run into problems around definition, and you're gonna realize like, okay, couch, like four-legged object for sitting on, like, okay, well, what about a three-legged couch, or like, and you can do this with a dictionary. Someone might go, oh well, the dictionary is this like perfect source of truth or something like that. Like, let's look up like like you could literally pick a term, couch definition. So to stoop, to press, to bend. Oh, it's not giving me the piece of furniture. I'll just do chair.
Yeah, separate
It's
seat
giving
for
me
one person, typically with
oh,
a back
I
and
did
four legs.
crouch. Yeah, right. A piece of yeah. What here? We'll use yours. That's fine. What did you use? A separate seat for one person, typically with a back and four legs. Okay. So what about a chair that sits two? Is that not a chair anymore? What about a chair with
This no,
that doesn't have legs at all?
5 legs.
What
Look
about
at
a
that.
chair that doesn't sit anybody? Like, say that it's like, in my hometown, there's this like huge novelty chair that sits on the roof of this building, and you could put like 20 people on that thing. Or what about a little like, Barbie chair or something like that? So you can keep carving out edge cases like that, and the other person can keep kind of like ad hoc trying to hedge the definition to account for all the edge cases. But it just turns out being really difficult to actually give necessary and sufficient conditions for membership in a group. Well, I don't know. I want to say like most of the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you like, and we can just keep going. Like, I don't know if you want to do the whole exercise and try to go, okay, or that could be sat on by a little person, or that could seat multiple people. Like, we can kind of do the exercise and keep going and keep finding edge cases. But like, it's sort of a understood thing that this is a challenge, and there's concepts here like family resemblance, and I won't really talk about that, but yeah. So I think that your hypothetical critic who thinks that we should be able to give necessary and sufficient conditions for the terms we use, um, I mean, I'm just really not convinced that that's like epistemically possible a lot of the time. I'm not sure that I'm in a position to be able to do that. So if they think that that's dishonest or Weasley, I can't do anything about someone. Well, I can try. I mean, I can tell them I'm not being dishonest. I can explain the philosophical concern. I can show how it generalizes and how we get other cases of it. Um,
Yeah, well, I think you
but if they
demonstrated quite
still
well
just
by
think I'm
analogy.
dishonest, I don't know what to do about that. Yeah.
No, I think the analogy is helpful there, right? Like showing how there's a lot of cases where you can't necessarily get a solid definition. I mean, even in the definition that we googled, typically with a back and forelegs, it's very like condition. It's like conditional is caveating already. When you look at definitions, even dictionary definitions like this, which you could still pick holes in, it seems as though this conversation has been had to some extent where somebody's gone, well, they don't always have a back and forelegs, but okay, let's add typically, right?
Yeah, and dictionary definitions give you a good general idea. They communicate concepts to us. We're like, oh, okay, like I have a general sense of this. But thing is, if you try to then ask certain kinds of philosophical questions about chairs using some rough notion like that, you'll just be like, oh, like I don't know. That's going to be contingent on like what our notion of like legs is. Like
Yeah.
if you work with the rough, shitty notions, then you'll like open up all these philosophical problems that you well, don't exactly. I don't know. I don't know the best way to make that point. But it like think of like with the chair, you you can you can just it seems like you can just keep going. I don't know if you hit like with some things you hit a point where you can't come up with counterexamples, or you've like whittled out a chair pretty well. But it seems like you can keep doing stuff. Like you try to like account for the fact that like figurines can sit on it, and then what if they talk about like non-human things sitting on it? Like what if something that's not like a human figurine, and then they say, okay, it's just about something with like a thing sitting on it that has like bones and joints or something like that. You're like, okay, what about say that there were hypothetically some kind of chair that could be constructed at the level of like I don't know, some like small particles or something like that. Like is that thing like it just you yeah, I mean, I think I've kind of made the point. Like
Yeah,
you
there
can
will
just kind
never
of
not be edge
keep going
cases.
with well, maybe there won't. Maybe at some point you are like pretty confident you've like zeroed in on something, but at least a lot of the time, even after decent effort, it's not at all clear that you've arrived at that point. And someone having no sense about that and telling the person who has some caution about it that they're being Weasley just sort of reveals that they're novice or confused or something like that.
Okay. Definition criticism sufficiently dispatched. Let's adopt then this. Let's grant P1 for the purpose of this, right, and say that we're using definition of vegans, whereby vegans exclude animal killing or exploitation to whatever extent is practical and possible. Understanding that that
Now,
might not be your precise definition, but if we
yeah,
grant that,
and I'll
yeah,
I'll also say I don't fully understand that definition. Like I don't totally understand what exploitation is supposed to be. So, and their practical and possible can also be kind of hard to understand. So, I mean, I have a general sense and I can try to work with it. But if the argument starts becoming contingent on having a sharper notion of exploitation than oh, that's the point that I was trying to make earlier. If the argument if it starts becoming contingent on us having like a sharper notion of exploitation than is provided, well then we'll hit a problem. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with using folk concepts. It's just when you Avi and I call this clarity for purpose. When you impose a burden of clarity on the concept with some purpose that you're trying to use it for, which it can't meet, that's when you're gonna hit a problem. It's gonna be like, I'm not sure. I don't know if that premise is true. Because again, I don't know about those terming stuff. Okay, so yes, P1 I grant, though I'm just mentioning I have some reservations about understanding some of the terms. We could continue from there. You want to look at P2?
Yeah, and I'll just note, although point appreciated, I'll just note that don't actually use exploitation anywhere else. So in this case, we could drop it. But yes, I agree with your point that exploitation is very vague. Am I exploiting my dog for company, for example? Right. All sorts of examples like that
Mm.
that I'm sure you could think of. But okay, if we grant P1.
And there's other problems where you might be able to get it to go through, but then it might not matter because I might not care about that notion of veganism. Like, is if we're just saying that it's about excluding as much killing as possible. Well, if you frame that in the right kind of way, maybe, but like there's cases where we want to kill, and there's cases you can create
Mm,
where you would want to like increase killing to produce overall more well-being. Like say you had a choice of like tons of little entities that have really minimal experience or like a bad experience or something like that, and you have to kill off like massive amounts of those to make room for entities with like positive experiences or something. Like, if you have a big enough gradation in sentience between those two things to a point that one is, it's like its level of sentience is just like it like its consciousness is just like a screen that is like white or black or something like that. And then some other is like some like rich, like highly conscious, like like humans, higher than humans, AI, something like that. um then you're probably going to get a prescription to like maximize killing in that case, because say the universe just filled with these little entities, and what, like, we're making a simplified universe, just it's just every bit of space is occupied with those little entities, and every bit that you carve out gets occupied with the kind of entity that has the much better experience. I think you're just going to get a prescription to like kill as many of those things as possible to replace them with the other kind of entity. So that's just to say that, like, even if all this reasoning goes through, unless we kind of talk through those things, it could just be that I end up going, "Oh yeah, vegans are hypocrites," with respect to some definition of vegan that I think is just is just like a bad way to live, or like an evil ideology or something like that. Like, would this form of veganism, for instance, that kind of killing is wrong? Because if so, you kind of get another problem where it's like, okay, well, now we might get into something where he agrees with P1. Let's just say hypothetically I end up agreeing with P2 and P3 now, and we get the conclusion. It could be, even if you get your conclusion, you don't get somewhere you want because the notion of vegan you've used is one that I just am not interested in defending, and have never had any interest in defending, and that I think is like evil or something like that. So that's a kind of I'm just noting that. We can keep going looking at the premises, but I'm sort of pointing out you might not actually be happy with the conclusion you get, depending how we're defining the term.
yeah, okay, that's worth noting. And I think we should keep going regardless. And I'll note as well that I do think there are vegans who would bite the bullet on what you've just said, because for them it really is about no, it just has to be me causing no harm. And if that means that I, leave the trolley problem where I kill the 1,000 super sentient creatures and, don't kill the one insect or whatever, then so be it. I haven't caused any harm. I think
Okay,
that kind of view is crazy, but yeah.
okay, so say that basically you just have like two layers in a 3D space, and one layer is like the highly conscious and has like really positive experiences, has like love and does science and all that kind of stuff. And the other it's just the experience of, yeah, like, what did I say? A white and black. It just, their consciousness has a total range of expression of being able to see white or being able to see black. And it's not like our seeing white, where you have all these thoughts about like, oh, I'm thinking about how it's white. My mind can wander off. No, like, that all this consciousness is perception of the color white. Let's even take away a color. They just perceive white. And let's add some negativity and a mild headache. So it's just the feeling of some level of pain and just seeing white. So the question is now, in our little 3D space, should we replace the first kind of space with the second? Now, if someone says no to that, oh, they can bite that bullet. That's fine. I would kind of say at that point they have like a hilarious ideology, and I would, just like with NTT, I just kind of say, I think that's the point of reductio. We can like just sort of, that's your view. People can choose from there, because I don't know that there's anything I could say that would be more off-putting than that. If someone still at this point does agree with what you're saying, I'm not sure anything else I could say would motivate them away from it. But I suspect most people, if they have clearly understood that example, would be like, okay, yeah, obviously we would want to get rid of the all this stuff clogging up the universe with just seeing white and having a headache. Let's like clear that out and replace it with like highly sentient, flourishing life. So I'm happy with their bullet bite. If that's like telling me, when I deliver the infinite disabled Holocaust reductio, going, I think some Carnists would just accept that. I just go, yeah. I mean, I'm sure. There are some fucking insane people out there, and that's the point where I would just lay the cards on the table and just say, okay, that's the view. You agree with that? I don't know if there's anything else I can say, but if you would oppose a disabled Holocaust, then you should come over to my side.
Okay, this is super interesting, and my temptation here is to really take a left turn from we're looking at this syllogism, but I think then the type of definition of veganism that you are approximating towards, and I appreciate you don't necessarily have like a written in stone one, is similar to what I talk about in terms of the main concept that I talk about on my channel is called Vegan 2.0, and my viewers have encouraged me to think about what the difference from Vegan 1.0 might in fact be. And in the video where I first explained it, I said Vegan 1.0 is about minimizing the harm that you cause to animals, and Vegan 2.0 is about maximizing the harm that you prevent from coming to animals. And a lot of people came on in the comments and said, well, veganism's not about minimizing harm. That's where it's gone wrong. It's not about minimizing harm. You're seeing it, and well, I might be projecting their criticisms a little bit. You're seeing it in a sort of utilitarian framework, the critic might say, whereas really this is about a rights violation. In any case, I don't think that really is the difference that I'm talking about. Rather, I think it comes down to this word exclude, and I knew to put this in the definition here because I was looking at the Vegan Society definition for this purpose. It is about excluding exploitation and suffering, or however they put it, to whatever extent is possible. It's not about reducing the total quantity of. So it really is a focus on personal purity, you might say, or the way I think about it is that vegan 1.0s, vegans, right, can get obsessed into which plant foods cause fewer crop deaths and stuff like this, and really playing the whole game of trying to get as close as possible to zero animals harmed. Whereas I think they are completely neglecting the positive numbers that are available in this equation, whereby most vegans are playing the game as if the high score is the score closest to zero animals harmed. Whereas I'm proposing that there's a whole another level of this game that we can, right, the sequel to this game is maximizing the number of animals that we've helped. It's really pointless to do, there's diminishing returns as well, right? Once you get to the point of saying which crops entail fewest crop deaths, there's really diminishing returns for a bunch of additional effort there. And this is actually what I would say to this person who's talking about crop deaths, right? It doesn't matter, mate. It really doesn't matter. In the grand scheme of things, it's going to be a rounding error on the number of animals that you can save by giving to effective charities, by doing, sharing things and doing online activism. And effective activism really is the only tool that we have to make, introduce some positive numbers into the equation, which would otherwise completely be a game of trying to just minimize the negative impact of one's own life. And I think I see vegans playing that game, and it's so infuriating because there can be so much effort that goes into, we all know the kind of premiums that we pay for like vegan products, for example. And I do, and I will continue to do so, even though I realize that maybe I'd help more animals if I sort of spent the marginal dollars on giving to effective charities instead. But more broadly, my point is, if we use this definition of veganism, which is about excluding killing and exploitation or suffering and exploitation or however it's phrased, we miss out on all of the chances that we have to proactively do stuff to prevent that. It's not about excluding, it should be about reducing overall killing or exploitation or suffering. I've said quite a lot there, so I'll give you the chance to respond.
Well, you said at some point that this is the kind of thing you'd say to the crop deaths person, and I don't like that as a response to them. I think that you're just sort of falling into fighting vagueness. Like, what exactly is the claim? What exactly are you arguing with?
Well, I'm supposing that their argument follows some sort of structure like this, and I'm essentially
Okay, so
saying,
what does that amount to rejecting a premise of their argument?
Well,
because you want to make sure you're not just kind of sort of saying a bunch of stuff that sounds good that's like tangentially related or something. Like, if the idea is they're running this argument, what part of that showed one of the premises there as false?
Well, I suppose that I would say that I'm going to have a similar response to you in the sense of saying this isn't really a definition of veganism that I would care too much to defend. And I agree that if you did have this definition,
okay,
it is indeed practical to produce your own crops, and that so therefore. So I think I would have a similar response in that sense of basically saying I think that's a helpful definition of vegan.
I understand. Yeah, so we can ignore premise 2 and 3 and just say they turn out being true, because there's the like I can step into the vegan society shoes to some extent and see if I can find a place to fight back on whatever 2 and 3 start talking about. But it's also kind of worth noting, like, hey, if you're trying to attack my view, I'm not sure one is going to actually capture my view. So it could be that you get to your conclusion and you don't land a blow on my view. So if your goal is to do that, you're going to need to change P1. So I mean, that's I think a fine response, unless you have a dog in like defending all these like consequences of the vegan society definition or something like that. Unless you just for some reason really care about that definition, there's no need to kind of do any of this really.
Yeah, that's right. And I would say further, well, you're going to say I'm doing too much work on the other side.
Yeah, I was about to say you don't need to launch into a whole thing about how you feel about exclude and stuff like that. You can just say I'm not sure that actually captures what I mean by the term.
Yes, for sure. But
if I even mean one thing.
Yeah, right.
Which is not Weasley. We have polysemous language. Language can have subtly different meanings often.
Yeah, in different contexts and so on. Yeah.
Also, I'm gonna hop off in a few minutes. I went a little longer than intended here, but it's been a good conversation.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, pardon me. I don't mean to take up too much more of your time. So I think I would have a similar objection ultimately. I mean, obviously I've been trying to sort of do devil's advocate for the other side of this argument, but my response ultimately is that I think they're probably attacking a version of veganism that I don't really hold or care about defending.
Yeah, so it's sort of like this is like the buzzword deconstruction argument. This is what Avi calls this kind of maneuver. Like, basically, they're trying to throw this label at you. It's an argument that tries to slap a label on you, hypocrite. And basically, the problem is it's going to, depending how they use their terms, either it's going to come out true, but harmless, or it's going to just be false. So this is a pretty similar thing where you're like, look, it depends how you define vegan and this kind of stuff. But if you defend it in this way where it goes through, then it's true, but it's not the definition that I use or have any stake in defending. And if you try to get it to go through with respect to some kind of usage I care about, I'm not clear that it will. And this should seem kind of obvious, right? Like, I'm sure you can define an ideology in some kind of way that makes a bunch of people hypocrite. But I'm not convinced that I'm a hypocrite, and I don't assent to whatever exact description you give that's giving that conclusion. I mean, you can try to find one that I do assent to that gives that exact conclusion, but you might not be able to, and that's not me being Weasley. That's just you not being able to find a good critique. Don't blame the target for not getting hit. Blame your aim.
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yeah. Yeah, so I
um,
think my hope here is that you'll kind of generalize this, because like, and this actually is broader than hypocrisy arguments. It's just kind of how to argue generally. But yeah, I mean, get the claim, make sure there's actual disagreement, get the argument for it, and also do semantics, right? Because it could be that you don't actually disagree on some given semantic. It's just like, oh, it's just fine on that one, and then on the one where you do disagree, it's just not substantiated or something like that. So yeah, this is how I think about all the hypocrisy stuff. It all just is basically trash, and it all just tries to leverage vegans reflexively kind of lashing out when they're called hypocrites or when their morality is drawn into question. If you just stay calm, get the claim, make sure you disagree, get the argument from it, it just all is it's all just like super trash. Yeah.
well, there you go. Expertly done. Probably a good place to leave it then, eh?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, okay. Well, it's been good talking, and I have some messages from you that I have to respond to. I've just been, as I said, a little trapped in this coding
Oh
stuff, but
yeah, no time pressure on
do
my
not
end here.
worry, I will be responding.
No
Just
worries.
get sometimes in the rabbit hole a bit.
Yeah, sounds good. No time pressure on my end. Yeah, well, appreciate you taking the time, and I'll probably upload this conversation tonight.
Cool. Okay. Have a good rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks, dude. Speak soon.